Well, good morning, good afternoon and good evening, wherever you're listening around the world. A very warm welcome from London in the UK. Here is today's news in electric cars and the future of transport. My name is Martin Lee and this is your EV News Daily for Wednesday, the 7th of March 2018. Coming up today, more manufacturers stop selling diesels in favour of electric hybrids, whilst one very large one commits to diesel. Plus more from today's Geneva Motor Show, like the Hyundai Kona, which you and I will talk about on the show tomorrow. But first of all, something that I teased at the start of the podcast yesterday as it was being announced when we were recording the show. It was the first ever electrified Bentley. The Bentley Bentayga Hybrid will come with a 3-litre petrol engine combined with a plug-in hybrid system capable of 31 miles of silent running. Bentley said this was the world's first luxury hybrid. Let's just give Land Rover a call and see if they would class their recent Range Rover Sport plug-in as luxury and/or hybrid. I think they would. Anyway, the Bentley can be selected to drive in EV mode only, and the common hold mode that many have should be the one that you use when you drive into urban areas. And if those areas have banned diesel or petrol, or they charge a levy, for instance, for combustion engines, you can run in electric mode only, so you can hold the charge. Well, charging is what you'd expect for a battery, around 10 to 15 kilowatt hours. All they would say is the battery fully charges in 2.5 hours on a fast charger, although nowhere could I find the size of the battery and the size of the motor. If it was announced, it was in none of the research that I could find today, the multiple reports that we read about this for the podcast. The combined power of the electric motor and the engine means that you should get 75 grams per kilometre of CO2 on the NEDC measurement here in Europe. Now, NEDC is soon to go. A reminder that from later this year, all cars are going to move to the WLTP standard, which is much more like real-world driving, and it's said to be far less flattering on those kind of big engine luxury SUVs that have been adding little batteries to achieve what is in theory low emissions on the NEDC. With this new measurement of WLTP, there's a few worried people around. The Bentayga is coming in the second half of 2018. Well, it's certainly been a busy day of statements from car makers, any one of which would have been a headline piece of news on another day that we would have talked about for days, probably. But the news today kept on coming. First, we heard that Honda announced they were cutting diesels from their model lineups, and then Toyota popped up in my newsfeed as they said they would stop the sale of diesels in Europe and shift all of their focus on electric hybrids from this year. They said it was due to customer reaction, and you can see why, with less than 10% of Toyota's fleets being diesel sales. I mean, they're hardly making a huge sacrifice for the environment. However, it'll not only generate some pretty good publicity, but add to the pain for other car makers who have committed to diesel. And Toyota is said to be one of the only ones who might achieve the strict new EU rules. More on that in the show in a couple of minutes. Well, Toyota's sold over 400,000 hybrids here in Europe and are committed to soft hybrids rather than plug-in versions. They aren't expected to market their first full BEVs until 2020 at the very earliest. In fact, their recent TV ads featured charging stations covered in cobwebs as they actively went out of their way to take aim at those who do like to plug in. They really made that as a negative thing. Like, why would you ever want to plug a car in? Their campaigns for their luxury Lexus brand say that their hybrids charge themselves, which sounds like you're stretching the truth about as far as you can. I mean, they're not magical. They charge the battery with fossil fuels. Anyway, it certainly riled plenty of people who have got plug-in hybrids and plug-in full electrics, of course, as well, who previously had thought really fondly of Toyota and certainly took exception to be told they were stupid and doing the wrong thing for plugging in. Maybe a slightly misaimed marketing campaign that we might not see much more of. Toyota, of course, were very early with electrification, led the way, and have got a great heritage in putting batteries into cars. Well, next, remember the Honda Urban EV concept? It was unveiled a few months ago back at the Frankfurt Motor Show. It was the little circle-eyed, tech-laden concept, very cute, 2 bench seats for passengers. Well, today at Geneva, Honda confirmed a production version is coming. Speaking during Honda's 2018 Geneva Motor Show press conference, the senior vice president of Honda Motor Europe, Philip Ross, confirmed the news. He said this, and I quote, "A production version of this highly acclaimed concept will be introduced to Europe during late 2019, and in response to the positive feedback to this model, we expect to open order books for the Urban EV during 2019. So it's coming. However, how much of the concept look will transfer onto the production model? Certainly inside, it was all screens, wraparound screens that made their way into the doors. That's not going to make its way into a production version. Well, talking of concepts which have been confirmed, BMW said in Geneva yesterday the concept they showed off in Frankfurt a while ago, that'll be coming as well. It's part of a lineup of 25 full battery electric vehicles or electrified cars. The concept was, as BMW called it, the future of e-mobility, and it certainly looked like your typical concept car. Now they confirm it will be made in Munich, and it's going to be called the i4. They then noted the specs, which at concept stage, let's be honest, they don't mean anything. 0 to 60, 4 seconds. Top speed, 120 miles an hour. Total range, 373. And a battery system made of magical fairy dust. Well, the specs don't mean anything at concept stage, apart from steering you towards an idea of what segment it could be aimed at. Plus, they probably add a little range for optimism and technology improving. That would put it, you could say, in Model S, Tesla Model S territory. However, there's no date set for the i4 yet. All they would say is that their electrified range will be fully on the market by 2025. So really, having a car which can do exactly what a Tesla did 12 years before it, it's not too much to boast about when you think about it. When you scratch below the surface, I wonder if these auto execs and PR handlers have driven a car like a Tesla. They must have done, right? They must know these things when they make these grand statements, because Tesla was so far ahead of its time and continues to innovate with increasing autopilot sophistication and the Model 3 interior, which some people say is love it or hate it, but it's definitely the way that it's going to go. When you hear those statements from car makers saying range of this and this and this by 2025, you think, well, that doesn't blow me away to hear that BMW will match a Tesla in 2025. Anyway, onto a car which is here. Almost. The Porsche Mission E will be here in 2019, and plans are well advanced, including the installation of 800-volt charging stations at all their dealerships in North America to make use of the 350-kilowatt charging in the Mission E. And yesterday at the Geneva Motor Show, Porsche showed off its new model called the Mission E Cross Turismo. It's a crossover utility vehicle. I get confused. There's so many different segments now. It means it has all-wheel drive, it's got 4 doors, and room for the skis to go in the back, but it's still low and looks like a sports car. The specs mirror that of the Mission E, so 310 miles, right, the same as that, 250 miles added in a 15-minute charge at those rapid, ultra-fast times. Although a future model, Porsche says, it's road ready, as it's building on the work that they've already been doing for the Mission E. Well, given the price, it's going to be up there with Tesla Model S and Model X territory, so it's going to have to be very special. From the pictures today, it does look it. Another luxury brand, Aston Martin, confirmed today at Geneva that they're bringing back the legendary Lagonda brand for all their future electric cars. The CEO, Andy Palmer, explained, and I quote, "We believe people associate luxury in their cars with a certain traditional and old-fashioned approach because, to date, that's all that's been available to them. Lagonda exists to challenge that and to prove that being modern and luxurious are not mutually exclusive concepts. So they're going more the way of Tesla than, say, Bentley in the automation and pure electrification are their focus. Well, their aim is to work with solid-state batteries. They think 400 miles is the sweet spot for range, and they want to find a way to use induction charging to top the battery up in 15 minutes. If some of that sounds a little pie in the sky, because it is, Aston Martin don't have the deep pockets of some of their rivals, so they'll need a partner to achieve all of those ambitions rather than all the R&D costs themselves. And now, if you just felt the room go a little bit colder, let's talk about diesel and the competition that it poses to how quickly your favourite car makers are going to roll out electric cars. Let's get on to someone who made big headlines yesterday, Volkswagen CEO Matthias Müller. The more I think about this statement, as I've watched the video several times and I keep rereading it, the more I don't think he would have wanted the press to pick up on this one phrase. I mean, English is his second language. Let's see exactly what he said to Bloomberg, though, the head of Volkswagen. He said this, and I quote, "Diesel will see a renaissance in the not-too-distant future. People who drove diesels will realise it was a very comfortable drive concept. Once the knowledge that diesels are eco-friendly turns up in people's minds, then for me, there's no reason not to buy one. End quote. And I think it made all the headlines today because it is in opposition to everything VW have said since Dieselgate, which is all about how sorry they are, how the focus is on electrification, the humility they had, that now in 2018 to come out and say diesel will see a renaissance in the not too distant future kind of undoes a lot of the work they've done. And it says that their focus, despite what the flashy press releases and all those things say, that their focus is on diesel. He continues with this. Let me give you another quote. The rules of the game in the EU in relation to climate protection and emissions goals on CO2 are so challenging that governments cannot do without diesel. End quote. That sounds like a threat to me. Governments can't do without diesel? I think the governments will do what gets them elected at the next election, if you ask me. And the quote where he starts, the rules of the game in the EU, this isn't a game, right? But again, I wonder if it's his second language. I don't think he really means it like that. But when you read it on the page, the rules of the game in the EU, if that's all it is, a game, you're going to lose if you back diesel. This is from a company, right, that have spent 30 billion or earmarked 30 billion. They would have had that money in the bank were it not for Dieselgate. From what we've seen, cities introducing diesel bans in the future, other makers running away from diesel, just 2 more today. And even in Germany, they're talking about bans, right? The problem comes from the European Union regulations, if you didn't know this, by the way, to cut carbon dioxide. CO2 was the focus of pollution many years ago. It was the real devil, right? And diesel at the time was seen as the answer because diesel does emit slightly less CO2 than petrol. Well, the petrol cars at the time. Actually, for the best modern petrol, the best modern diesel, they're about the same on CO2. They didn't realise at the time, or maybe they did, and it wasn't, the governments didn't pay attention to any warnings, the dire consequences on public health of particulates, nitrogen released from diesel. The next target on the horizon is the EU rule that fleet emissions from all cars sold by each brand, right, so every car that each company sells, must have an average of 95 grams of CO2 by 2021, and if you miss it, you'll face some very hefty fines. Meeting that would be easier for these car makers with diesel. There's no doubt about it. But since Dieselgate, public opinion has turned. Now, saying that, Muller told reporters that VW won't miss those targets. So that doesn't make sense. If VW's on target not to miss the target, why panic? Why start promoting diesel again? Just talk up electric cars. Because there are really hefty fines coming for those that miss the targets. Diesel sales fell 19% in Germany last month. In the UK last month, it was at 35% for February 18, down from 50% in 2014. And last October, the investment research house MSCI warned all car makers apart from Toyota were at a risk of being fined by the EU for missing targets. So do governments secretly want diesel? Let's try and answer that with our final story today. I don't often read a government tweet, but I did today. I don't follow many government accounts, but this one really stood out to me because it caught my attention. In the UK here, we have it's not a kind of a tax benefit, if you like. It's a grant, really, £4,500 if you buy a pure electric vehicle. However, on top of the benefits already for taxi drivers, which I think is £7,500 or £8,000 to buy an electric taxi, there's another tax exemption coming, which is more like the American system of like tax rebates for taxi drivers starting next month, earlier than it was meant to start, to get an extra £1,550 off a brand new electric taxi. Zero emission taxis are now being made here in the UK by a company owned by Geely. Yeah, that's right. They own Volvo as well, the big Chinese company. Now, zero-emission taxis have no road tax to pay as well. Each London diesel cab that's on the road at the moment has about 7 tonnes of carbon dioxide emitted per year. And there's 75,000 of them on the roads. If you replaced them all with an electric range-extended taxi, can you imagine? So the government have got behind it. Chancellor of the Exchequer, Philip Hammond, said this is a victory for the environment and new technology. I am determined to support an economy fit for the future, ensuring the air in our bustling towns and cities is free from pollution, part of our quest to become the first government to leave the environment in a better state than we found it. End quote. That doesn't sound to me, Mr. Muller, like a government that needs diesel. It's been a funny old day. Thank you for listening today. Hope you enjoyed it. I'd love to spread the word about electric cars, so if you can, share this with somebody who might be interested. You can listen to every previous episode of the podcast on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify, YouTube, and on the blog, www.evnewsdaily.com. Subscribe for free and get every new episode automatically and first. It would mean a lot if you would take 2 minutes to leave a quick review on iTunes, which helps us spread the word to a wider audience about electric cars. And if you have an Amazon Echo, download our brand new Alexa skill. Search EV News Daily and add it as a flash briefing. Come and say hi on Twitter @EV News Daily. Have a wonderful day, and I will catch you tomorrow.